All right, so what I covered in my last video are the two different wavelengths of the revelation of God to humanity. The wavelength of Elohim, which is associated with the qualities of order, of power, and of judgment. These qualities are pretty much self-evident in Genesis chapter 1, which in my opinion Genesis chapter 1 ends where we find our Genesis chapter 2 verse 3. In my opinion, that should be the end of Genesis chapter 1. Why would you snip the Sabbath day out of the creation week unless it's already been cut out for you? Then we move forward to probably the most distinctive feature of the two creation narratives is the name change. Genesis 1, Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. Everywhere God creates or evaluates or does something, speaks something forth, it's Elohim. The most distinctive feature between these two narratives is the name change. And in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, we begin with YHVH Elohim, which in the past, in my Christian upbringing, just glazed right over it. Never even stopped to consider that there might be a difference. But it's the quality of YHVH Elohim that the ancients understood to be associated with almost an opposite type of energy from the powerful, judging, doing creator. The energy associated with YHVH Elohim from the perspective of the ancients is that of, the Hebrew word is chesed, where we in our English Bibles will translate that Hebrew word into grace. Noah found chesed in the eyes of YHVH. That word is translated as mercy, as kindness. So the qualities associated with YHVH Elohim as opposed to Elohim are mercy, kindness, forgiveness, compassion, connection. And these tensions, these almost polar opposite type of dynamics in YHVH Elohim versus Elohim are very tense. There's a lot of tension here. And to such a degree that these two narratives don't even seem to be written by the same author. This speculation emerged, if you know, I'm just a researcher. I'm no scholar. I don't have any degrees after my name, but the way I understand it is this speculation that there were more than one author of the book of Genesis because of this tension and because of these apparent contradictions in the two creation narratives. It was postulated, it was theorized that there were two authors. There was the Elohim author and the YHVH Elohim author. You can fact check me. They'll be called the J author and the E author theories. But for example, some of the tensions that exist between these two creation narratives is, for one example, the very last thing Elohim creates in the creation week is man, whereas the very first thing that YHVH Elohim creates in Genesis chapter 2 is man. It seems as if in Genesis 1 that Adam and Eve are created concurrently with one another, whereas in Genesis 2, Eve is created subsequent to Adam. So these kind of tensions exist and cause this multiple authorship theory of the book of Genesis. I, of course, disagree with that. Just to reiterate, I believe what God did was put a filter over the pure output of his essence so that we could understand him in ways that our brain could grasp. He places the Elohim filter over the pure output of his essence, and he places the YHVH element. There's a dual aspect and a dual understanding, a dual nature that is presented here in these opening chapters. The aspect of powerful doer versus connection and being. So we have doer Elohim, we have connection being YHVH Elohim. And these two dynamics we experience in our own lives. And in our own lives, we have tension within ourselves between these two natures. Probably most perfectly captured is the Harry Chapin song, Cats in the Cradle. And to me, this captures perfectly the tension between doing and being. Here's a man who is building a family, but feels the pressure of career, and he places career and doing over relationship and being, and he sacrifices a relationship with his son for career. And we feel that all the time. You know, it's like you just want to get home and be with your family, and then when you get there, you feel like you should be doing something. So we understand this tension that God is demonstrating to us, and we can relate to that. So the qualities of YHVH Elohim are much different than the qualities of Elohim. And this tension was understood and grasped by the original authors. And what we seem to be seeing in these two creation narratives is Elohim telling us the story of creation from within the time domain. You've got days 1, 2, 3, all the way through day 7, and then YHVH developing the story of creation from the perspective of eternity. There is no time. There's no chronology in Genesis chapter 2 creation narrative beginning in verse 4. In fact, it seems to place everything within the day. Let me read. This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day, in the singular day that the Lord God, YHVH, made the earth and the heavens. Very interesting verse. This is, in my opinion, the first place we see reversal of birth order. And this verse right in itself is profoundly prophetic. We find that in Genesis chapter 1, the Lord God, that Elohim created the heavens and the earth. In Genesis 2 creation narrative, we have a reiteration. This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day singular that the Lord God created the earth and the heavens. So we have a reversal of birth order between heavens and earth. Genesis 1, the chronological eldest, the firstborn, is heavens. Genesis 2 is that is a reversal of birth order. And what's very interesting is this reversal of birth order happens again and again in the Genesis narrative. We have a reversal of birth order in the one that is intended to receive the blessing. We have reversal of birth order with Abraham's firstborn is Ishmael. The blessing goes to Isaac. Isaac's firstborn is Esau. The blessing goes to Jacob. Jacob's firstborn, the first child that he considers a firstborn, is actually his 11th born, and that is Joseph. The blessing of fruitfulness goes past the entire first generation of Jacob's children, and it gets reversed in the second generation, Jacob's grandchildren, particularly Joseph's children, and you have the crossed hand blessing of Jacob upon second-born Ephraim and firstborn Manasseh. He places the right hand of blessing upon the second-born. So once again, you have this profound pattern being duplicated again and again, and heaven is unzipped. The megaphone has come through. The author of Genesis is saying to his kids, hey, pay attention, this is really important. The blessing is on the second birth. This is what Yeshua was teaching in John chapter 3 to Nicodemus. Are you a teacher of Israel and you do not understand these things? It was established in the beginning that the blessing goes on the second birth. It was established in the entire storyline of Genesis that the blessing is going to bypass your firstborn nature, your fleshly body nature, this suit, this matrix that we were born into. Anyhow, that's a whole different story. But I want to highlight for you that, again, Genesis is establishing a profound pattern of the blessing of the firstborn lands on the secondborn. It happens with Abraham bypassing Ishmael to land on Isaac, Isaac being deceived, but the blessing of the firstborn lands on Jacob, and Jacob, through a whole bunch of drama, ends up bypassing the blessing of the firstborn that should have been going to Manasseh, and it ends up on Ephraim. Pay particular attention to these repeated patterns. I've already established the basis for the name of my channel, Prayer of the Barren Womb. The pattern of the barren womb is a critical component. And if you haven't seen my first video, go there. But the prayer of the barren womb is repeated again and again and again, just like the blessing of the firstborn, bypassing the firstborn and landing on the secondborn. These patterns repeat themselves, and this is heaven's way of saying, hey, pay particular attention to these patterns. They're meaningful. And this is what Yeshua intended us to understand, and rebukes Nicodemus for not understanding it. Are you a teacher of Israel and you do not know that you need to be born again? You need the second birth in order to receive blessing? So these patterns are incredibly critical to our understanding. However, back to Genesis chapter 2. The essence, the quality of YHVH is connection. I mean, and look at what Elohim created for man versus what YHVH created for man. Elohim created for man this incredibly powerful world with its periodic table of elements, with its laws that fully determine outcomes, chemistry, biology. All these things are, it is written. The laws of nature are steadfast, they endure. And this incredible world was created for us to create in, to partake of image and likeness of Elohim, to build, to produce, to be fruitful, to take dominion. And so world one is incredibly powerful, fruitful, wonderful place, filled with mystery, filled with power, filled with potential. World one is an Elohim world. What does YHVH create for man in the second Genesis narrative? Not a world to take dominion, but a garden. YHVH creates a garden for man, a place to hang out, a place to laugh and joke, a place to eat meals and enjoy one another, a place of connection and being versus a place of powerful doing. So this tension exists in not only the timelessness of Genesis chapter 2. There seems to be no chronology really associated with Genesis chapter 2. But the whole emphasis of Genesis 1 versus Genesis 2 is entirely different. And so these are critical understandings as we hopefully make it to the 4 rivers. I'm already at 13 plus minutes into our story with the 4 rivers. I guess I'll just touch. Okay, I'll touch briefly on each one of the rivers. And this is Genesis chapter beginning in verse 10. Now a river, a singular river, went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 rivers. Okay, first mention of rivers that originally got my mind moving in this tract. So another distinction to be aware of between the Genesis 1 narrative and the Genesis 2 narrative is what water is doing. In Genesis 1, water is being separated. The echad, the one water, is being divided between upper waters and lower waters. In Genesis 2, the one waters emerging from Eden, the echad waters emerging from Eden, are being separated into 4 riverheads. They're being separated into 4 rivers. The one water in Genesis 1 is separated above from below. The one water from the Eden is being separated into 4 rivers. So water is doing something different in Genesis 2 versus Genesis 1. And these 4 rivers, the name of the first is Pishon. Pishon is used only once in the Bible, but it's apparently derived from the word push, which is to be scattered, to spread out, to spread abroad, to grow fat. The second river, and the name of the second river is Gihon, which goes out around the whole land of Cush. Gihon is bursting forth, and the imagery is that of childbirth, a child bursting forth from the womb. The name of the third river is Gihon. Oh, I'm sorry. The name of the third river is the Hiddekel, and once again, it's a very curious word. The derivation of Hiddekel is not clear, but it is associated with rapid movement. And then the Euphrates, once again, derivation is unclear, and it's associated with fruitfulness. Okay, I'm at 15 minutes, so we'll get back to the rivers in the next video. Thanks for watching.